Willys MB L134 engine carrier bearing assembly. Looking directly into the bell housing on the L134 engine that mates to the T84 transmission, I'm going to point out the fulcrum ball here. That's going to become important later. This is the input shaft to the T84 transmission, and this little cap here, there's a hole that will mount our spring to later. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some high temperature grease to the sleeve on the T84 transmission. This is what the carrier bearing rides back and forth on. I'm going to apply a little grease also to the fulcrum ball and then to the very end of the input shaft of the transmission. This will help later when we mate the engine and the transmission together. You don't need a whole lot of the grease, just a nice light coat on all the parts. First thing I'm going to install is the spring. The spring part number is 630177. I'm holding the carrier bearing in my hand and it's oriented the way it would go on to the input shaft. I've got the spring facing down on the carrier bearing so I can clip the other side easily into the nose cone. The carrier bearing is part number 639654. I'm applying a light film of the high temp grease to the inside of the carrier bearing. Slide the carrier bearing onto the sleeve of the transmission, facing the spring towards the passenger side of the vehicle. Using a pair of needle nose pliers, I will grab the loose end of the spring and attach it to its spot on the cap of the transmission. I'll get in close here to show you exactly how I've got this spring oriented. You see how I've got the spring, it loops into the little hole in that casting in the front cap, and the other side is facing down as I showed you earlier in the video. The lever is part number 630112. I've applied just a little bit of the grease to the areas that will contact the carrier bearing. Pull the carrier bearing slightly forward and install the lever onto the square casting blocks on the back side of the carrier bearing. The dimple goes over the top of the fulcrum ball. We'll give it a little test here. We'll just push on the lever and make sure it goes back and forth nice and smoothly. Everything seems to be working really well here. It's nice and smooth, no binding. Give the carrier bearing a little spin. The bearing turns nice and smooth. It's lubricated from the factory and never needs servicing. I like to install just a little bit of the high temp grease to the area on the lever where the cable ball will ride. The lever cable is part number A5102. On one end there's a ball and on the other end a yoke. We're going to insert the ball through the back side of the hole in the bell housing and simply clip it in to the lever. The grease will hold it in place for the time being. It works perfectly. Give it one last check to make sure everything's functioning nice and smoothly, and it is. The carrier bearing assembly is installed.